I am a Luke practitioner, a third generation practitioner. My mom and my grandmom were initiates, going back into the early 1970s, late 1960s. I am initiated to Shango. I am a Palero by license. I've been licensed to be what is called a Tata, to initiate other novices and create a spiritual foundation. I was initiated in Havana, Cuba in 2005 by a priest of Viemonja by the name of Marta Sanchez Omilade Kinkamache, as well as a Cuban woman by the name of Maria Elena Lopez Obadelemi in 2005 on Subriana Street in Central Havana. 14 years later, I've been to Cuba a total of 10 times. I've initiated people in Cuba. I've conducted ceremonies. And I am currently a diviner and a spiritualist that I work to alleviate people of psychological and emotional traumas.
My name is Kristen. I'm Oba's goddaughter. I am at the stage in my development where I have I've sat with the Oracle. I have been initiated in Palo Mayombe, and I work spiritualism. So Padrino. So like today, I think a good place to start this conversation is just discussing spirituality in the African context, or from the African perspective.
From the African perspective, it is first you have to address the elephant in the room, which is omnipresence and omnipotence. In order to necessarily examine spirit from the African perspective, you have to understand that the African believes that everything has spirit in it. So anything that you may consider to be inanimate, the African assigns a spirit to it. There's a folklore to it. How did the chair become the chair? Because of lack of sacrifice, or because he did not heed an advice, he may have been stuck in this position, right? This is the African perspective on things, that there's a cause and effect to everything, right? So African spirituality is not articulable from a perspective of using the words that we're used to using, because it is not spirituality as the Western world sees it. The Western world sees things as living and dying, and then this in-between world, and then some sort of judgment. The entire concept of reincarnation and all that is an African perspective concept, so that nothing ever dies, it just replenishes itself, right? And it keeps regenerating. They make a very particular description of growth, particularly in Lukumi traditions, when they speak about kola, right? And when something be kola, to be born to grow, right? That concept also invites death into it, because for every seed that bears a tree, that bears fruit, that bears more seeds, that essentially that tree will at some point fall. So life and death are inseparable from the African perspective. You cannot have death without life, or life without death. They are married intrinsically. So the African perspective of spirit is that everything has a spirit, so that everything is to be respected. Now, the circumstances or the consequences of the said consciousness is that of the consciousness's journey.
But hold on. Run that back. Go ahead.
Okay. The consciousness. So when we talk about spirit, we're talking about consciousness.
Okay.
What is conscious? Consciousness is the ability to be aware of self and one's environment and to try to manipulate one's environment for one's well-being. So it would be easy for you to say that the chair has no consciousness, right, and can't protect himself. But if I kick the chair right now, I may hurt my shins. Is that me just hurting myself, or did the chair become hard enough that it retaliated, right? We'll never know. So the chair is somewhat conscious, right? Okay. So now that consciousness, if it comes under attack by me, by way of that chair originally started out as a trunk, a tree trunk. And I came into the forest and I needed to cut one of these trees down, and my consciousness picked a particular tree and I began to chop that tree down. Now the tree is no longer a tree, it's dead. But I have directly affected the ability for the tree to become, later on, a chair. And life did not end with it just being a tree. It transcended from a tree to pieces of wood, and those pieces of wood became a chair, and that chair becomes a landmark within my environment. Right? How long do I have the chair? When the chair breaks down, will someone come in the house and ask me about the chair? Hey, what happened to that chair you had there? So that means that the chair has a life of its own. It had an existence. It was recognized amongst other conscious beings of being this entity within my environment. Right? So the African thinks on that level about consciousness. So again, at some point the tree, in the tree's universe or the tree's reality, a decision was made by the tree that didn't allow the tree to be in the right place, so that it was in the wrong place, that I chopped it down. Right? Now, other factors may have eliminated that option or that chance purely by the lightning striking the tree. And lightning struck the tree, and the tree got struck by lightning and fell apart, and then it wasn't there for me to choose it to become a chair. Right? So this is the omnipresence and omnipotency of God, that it's in everything. And everything there is a chance for other things. So we just went from a living being, an actual tree, that started out as a seed, grew to a root, ascended out of the ground, was strong enough to survive many seasons, right? Many invaders, albeit insects, mammals, birds, right? The elements, and then it met its demise by a man with an axe. But it didn't stop there. That tree, again, to be redundant, became now a piece of wood that became a chair. Now the other parts of the wood may have become something else. The other parts of that wood may have become a desk in someone else's home. And so now that tree has gone from being a solo consciousness to a duplicitous consciousness. I have the chair, the desk may be in Ohio. Right? Some pencils may have been made by it, and those pencils may have drawn the next Mona Lisa. You understand? The tree has transcended just being a tree. Its consciousness has gone beyond that reality. So the African believes in that concept, and so God is impossible to placate or to worship, because the concept is, what would the shrine of God not have on it? Because where is God not present?
This is true.
So it would be futile to try to construct an altar dedicated to God when you don't have access to everything. Right? So I can't put an altar to God because I can't pull a planet down, or a star, or an asteroid, or a tornado, or an earthquake. I can't physically place those things to represent God, so I don't even try.
So that's interesting that you bring up this concept of kind of like that hierarchy, is essentially like God is there, but God is so vast that we can't necessarily fathom that. So what would you say is the damn, I lost my, hold on.
No, I got you. So the problem in that is you can't view God if you're inside God.
That's where I wanted to go. There we go.
Okay? You can't. So in the book I talk about the idea that the physicists speak about when they say that fish know that they're in water? Right? And do fish know that they're in water? No, they don't. Because it's all around them. They don't exist without it. Now, so the common misnomer is, oh, God lives within you. I beg to differ. You live within God, because you don't live without God. God is all around you. Without God, then you don't exist. So God is all around you. That means you're inside God. In order to view God means that you would have to come out of God. And you can't do that in the conscious state because you're inside God. The moment you're outside of God, then how do you function? Because you need God to function, just like the fish needs the water to function. So the fish don't even exist when it comes out of the water. It ceases to exist.
True.
So because the water is integral to the fish being what it is. So you taking God out of the equation is taking yourself out of the equation, because you're inside God. Right? And so this is the problem, when one would never be able to see God, because it is impossible to see that which you're already in. That would be like the equivalent of a cell trying to come out of my body and view me. My body allows the cell to function. Outside of myself, the cell won't live long enough to even try to grasp me in my totality, because the cell actually lived inside of me. So that astronomy becomes relevant in the new world when they are able to shoot into the rocket and get off the Earth and then look at the Earth. Right? I watched this documentary that talked about, the astronauts speak about when the sun hits you when you're not on the planet. You feel the radiation vibrating through your body, because you take for granted all of these safety nets that the Earth has placed between you and the sun. Right? So this is why it is futile in the African's perspective to even address God. You would have to address God the same way that an ant would address to get your attention in your house. The ant would have to have numerous ants that would have to be doing something to you to even acknowledge them. This is what makes the three major religions powerful, is the idea of collectiveness. Right? So if I have a lighter, I can't light up the sky. But if I get with 3 million people and we turn our lighters on, we can light up the sky. Right? This is what the monotheistic concept was used, is to use people's energies to channel a certain specific deity, so that that deity would then reverberate back to them whatever it is that they wanted to accomplish.
So the idea of monotheism, is that something, I know it's greatly debated when you hear people say, well, were Africans not monotheistic, or were they polytheistic, or somewhere kind of in the middle?
Well, monotheism is a construct that has nothing to do with spirituality. It has everything to do with unification of people for resources. Polytheism, again, these are words used to describe things that are indescribable. The African mentality is that there's a place for everything and everything has its place. And there is a natural hierarchy to things. So and that goes into like the food chain when we talk about the king of the jungle. Mm-hmm. What makes the king of the jungle? Because that is the species that is not hunted by any other species becomes the top of the food chain. So they become dominant. And they become the most responsible. So it is the responsibility of the lions not to eat too many antelope, so that the antelope necessarily are abundant and have a numerous population for the herd. It would be irresponsible for the lion to continue to keep hunting the antelope all day and all night, right? Because eventually there will be nothing left for the lion to eat, which would then cause the lion to then practice homicide amongst each other, right? Or, well, it wouldn't be homicide because of the word, but they would necessarily commit murder amongst each other because they're imbalanced, right? So there is a great responsibility in that hierarchy. So polytheism as opposed to monotheism. Monotheism, like I said, is when you look at the roots of it, the Jews came to monotheistic philosophy in order to go to war with the Philistines, right? So they needed a way to unify the 12 tribes under one umbrella. So they came up with one concept of a deity that was above all their deities, right? That was a unification instrument. But Africans believe that there's a God, but not necessarily that it's just one. And I'm not even talking about the Orishas. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the concept when you speak of in Yoruba context, Olodumare is not a singular consciousness. What would be the lot of God if God had nobody to talk to? Right? This is the conundrum even within the Bible. It's like when God is doing all this talking, who's God talking to? Right?
Right.
Even in Job, you see that God doesn't acknowledge the devil as a subordinate. He'd be like, devil, you've been walking here and there, well, come over here, let me talk to you. And the devil would be like, well, yeah, you all great and all that, but your children don't really love you. He's like, well, what you mean? He says, well, look at Job. If you take all of that stuff away from him, I guarantee you he'll curse you. At no time did God stop the devil from affecting Job. God was like, well, okay, let's see what happens. He never announces or addresses the devil as a subordinate. He addresses the devil as a peer. The other part is in the Bible they say that God acknowledges that there's these other deities. He says, have no other idols or gods before me, for I am a jealous God. Why would you be jealous if there's no competition? Right?
And that passage, I want to say it's in Genesis, it says, let us make man in our own image.
Exactly.
And no one could ever tell me growing up in church, who is us? Because
God is not a singular consciousness or a singular judgment. It is the consciousness of many things that come to order. Spirituality is the practice of taking chaos and making some sort of order out of chaos, right? Man doesn't become spiritual till he start cutting down the forest and start building a house. right? This is why God is exclusively associated to a house, because it was the first time man was separated from the elements, right? So, because before that, everything else, he is subject to everything else. The insects, the birds, the mammals, the predators, the serpents, the amphibians, everything is on the ground and in the trees. There's nothing exclusive. When man slashes the forest and clears a space and builds a home, is when he starts to think about God. And this only happened when human beings became horticulturalists. In the Yoruba pantheon, we credit Obatala with the beginnings of civilization. Obatala, as a female deity, was in charge of horticulture. This is why the yam is so important, because it's something that, as hunter-gatherers, that once you see the plant, you know that there's this root there all the time. And so now that changed the chasing of the herd, because now meat is not our staple food. We have something else to eat that we don't have to look for by chance. I know where it is. So when Obatala, as a female avatar, pulls out the first yam, this allows human beings to be less nomadic. In being less nomadic, it allows us to nurture those who are born imperfect. Because if you're nomadic, you have no time to stay for someone who is infirm. We gotta go. If he can't keep up, then he gotta go. Once we have another staple of food, so we can say, you know what, let's eat this yam, and we'll wait for the herd to come back through, because we got enough meat. So we ain't gotta chase the herd. We know that the herd will come back through here, right? Again, through time. And these are all feminine ideals. Remember that from a very indigenous or archaic perspective of mankind, women are the rulers of the society, of the clan. Mm-hmm. They have an internal clock that is connected to the moon, which allows them to chart the moon, and based on their menstruation, being able to now count, they have a concept of time. Mm-hmm. Now they have a concept of time. They can figure out, like I said, that the herd passes through here at a certain time, and what herds pass through here. So now they're conscious of the day and the amount of time that they have. When they begin to become horticulturists and they start to pull out these tubers and learn how to eat them, which allows to give them sustenance without having to chase meat, when they give birth to imperfections, they no longer have to keep up. And so the house was originally born for the albino. Right? And about the lie, it talks about Afin, albino, the albino, right? And the albino being attached to Obatala. So now the albino, because the albino cannot go and hunt and gather like the others in the sun, the albino is given specific solace and time to ponder about their beginnings and what is affecting them. And so the albino has a different relationship with the sun, right? And so the albino gives us context to the idea that there is something else besides us. There's something else that is in play, that if we pay attention to a pattern, we will see a pattern of behavior by just the environment, seasons, time, these things. And these are all matrilineal feminine properties. Men are there as workhorses to the clan. You see this in most clans. If you pay attention to animals like the lion, the male has a specific job, and that is to necessarily keep producing the next generation. The females do the hunting, they do the rearing of the children, and they are the instigators to the courtship amongst the clan. So it is the females who will boost another male up to think that he can try for the crown. Because the females have already detected the defects in the king already. So they were already prepared to make a change, and so they do this by necessarily pumping him up, right? So that the male species originally is there to protect the female species, because the female species have the arduous task of giving birth.
Right. So, with all of that, would you say God is a woman?
Absolutely. But not one woman. And not just a woman. So, the proverbial riddle of the world is, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I propose, how about they both came at the same time, and then they made an agreement to come together. So, again, this is from the African perspective. The African perspective on spirituality is that spirituality is nothing but space and time layered on top of each other. Hear me out. For every level of life, there are a particular number of archetypes, and they just expound themselves for every level above themselves.
Okay.
So, in the realm of insects, there is an archetype to each one of the orishas. So we have the ant. The ant is associated to Ogun and Elegba. Why? Because they are, one, they work together. They talk about cooperation. When you receive your warriors, as they say, the Elegba, Ogun, Ochosi, Osun, these are the first orishas that are given to you because they're there to teach you about cooperation, because you are now about to enter into a society which is founded on cooperation. The first cooperation is that Elegba, Ogun, Ochosi, and Osun work together. It is Osun's job to climb the tree and look out at the tree and see where the food is. Alert Elegba. Elegba alerts Ogun and Ochosi, takes them in the direction of the food. Ochosi executes it, and Ogun acquires it as he slashes through. These four components make up cooperation, right? So this is why you're giving them in the beginning, right? Elegba, Ogun, Ochosi, Osun. They represent the four levels.
I got you.
Okay, so now, Elegba, Ogun, and Ochosi are about our archaic selves, cooperation, how to get things done. So now, the ant is a unified thing. It's about the anthill, right? And so you have certain ones that are workers, and you have certain ones that are fighters. And it's about a society. So they associate those insects to the pathology of Elegba and Ogun, because ants use tools, right? They dig holes.
Our concept of what we call heaven, you know, in English and in the Western concept of spirituality, you know, heaven in the African spirituality in Yoruba or Lukumi, we from what I've learned, is called Orun.
Orun.
Okay, so how is heaven in Western spirituality is something that we strive for, and African spirituality, you know, we have. Is heaven something that, or Orun something that we're striving for, or are we already in a certain section or a room of heaven that we're just, you know, because the earth is in space, we're in the heavens.
I say to you. So, to give you context to, and not even to answer your question, because you already answered your question, I'm going to give you context so that you can connect the dots. Orun is a word for heaven, but it's also a word for the sun. Because there's a sun in the center of the earth, Orun, right? So there's a translation in the concept of ego, when you hear them say Ara Onu. Ara means earth or land. Onu means a great stomach. So they're talking about a heaven that is beneath our feet, because that's where they bury you. And so when you're buried, you have to go down before you go up.
Okay.
So because this is a magnet, because this sun has magnetism to it, so it has a magnet in it. So it's pulling you into the center of the earth first to temper you. This is where your soul is going to be tested. This is what they talk about being the judgment. So the conversation about the alchemist is that he wants to turn lead into gold, right? That's really just a euphemism for the concept of ascension. Lead is dense. It doesn't allow energy to flow through it, right? Radiation don't pass through lead. But lead is still soft, that it's malleable, right? So that says something about the common man. He's dense, that the real true forces are not allowed to pass through him. But he's malleable enough that the tangible can form him into whatever they want to.
Okay.
Right? But the alchemist wants to turn into gold. And gold is forever. And it's conductive. And it's malleable. It is the perfect example of a spiritual goal. Is to necessarily be like gold. Right? Gold is forever. Right? It doesn't oxidize, it doesn't rust, it doesn't do any of these things. So the alchemist is saying that one wants to necessarily, his soul to be light and brilliant and conductive and malleable like gold, not like lead. And to be like lead is to be dense and to hold on to things and to not be light so that you sink as opposed to floating and ascending.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes.
And so this is what the whole golden dawn and all of these shit that these niggas is talking about is the concept of trying to turn lead into gold, is the ability to change one's soul so when they say give your heart to Jesus, right? They don't really describe or explain what they really telling you to do. You could have been a murderer. When you are absolved is when you take account for what you've done. I was terrible. I slayed many men. But it was all in the name of God, because even the murderer has been inspired by God, because God is omnipotent. There's no idea under the sun that God didn't think about. So when you have to be careful about these people who God picks to be the wrath. These are people who have been excommunicated, exiled out of society. Nobody's talking to them, so they're not conversing with anyone, and so they're fine-tuned to a different frequency, and they can hear some other shit going on. And some other shit says to them, go get a gun from Kmart and load it up and go in that nursery and shoot them kids. And again, we don't know what the tree is going to become after I chop it down. So the little girl that got killed in the nursery, they put a picture up and they deify her, and she becomes something that she would have never been.
Inspiration.
Right. Because if she'd have grown up, she might have grown up to be a meth head. But here it is, she got chopped down. That tree got chopped down, and now it became some furniture. It became a pencil that drew the Sistine Chapel. I just came full circle. Like I told you, it took me a minute to come around the block. The reciprocity is that you don't know what the tree is going to become in the future when it's chopped down. You may try to stop me and say, don't cut the tree down. But you don't know what potential the tree has in its next life. In its next life, it may become sawdust that'll fill a hole in somebody's house so that they don't necessarily have to feel the cold in their house no more. We don't know what benevolent miracles that this other life will do. I'll give you an example. In the book, I have a picture of my best friend, right? Who died at 16. His death directly affected me. He's become my pencil to paint my picture.
Right.
That tree got chopped down and they made him into pencils, and I took that pencil and now here I am. Right? And so you don't know what that life will lead to and how it inspires, right? Or how it affects. And this is the African concept of spirituality, that God is in everything and spirit is in everything. So the cigarette, there's a spirit in it. There was a plant, that was a piece of tobacco, that was a tobacco plant, and that tobacco plant got pulled, and that tobacco plant said, I want to be inhaled by somebody who's going to speak the truth. Right? And so we never know how everything is connected. This is what the South American Indians talk about when people experience ayahuasca. The main common denominator is that people come back with, the world is connected. Everyone's connected. Right? We're all connected because we're connected because of God.